let's talk about what happened with Melania. Did she just forget where she first heard those lines? And what's the verdict on Chris Christie's trial by delegates? And is America one Trump closer to being great again? As we count down to the final night of the Republican National Convention and look forward to the keynote speech by candidate Trump, we'll get some answers when we speak to members of Brooklyn's own Grand Ode Party.
Gene Berardelli is an attorney, expert on New York election law, and the founder of the national award-winning podcast Behind Enemy Lines, a show that highlights national politics with a conservative spin from insurgent Republicans. Welcome back to BK Live.
It's a pleasure to be back with everybody.
It's a party. And we're also joined by our own BRIC TV chief correspondent, Mr. Brian Lyons.
Thank you for having me. It's nice to be on this side of the table.
It's a new experience for you, right?
Yeah, it's good.
But he puts the chief in chief correspondent.
I'm intimidated already. I mean, I feel the presence.
Look at that.
You know, I have to say that, you know, most times I really don't think about Cleveland very much, but, you know, I have been anticipating, watching the dealings and goings on for this for the last couple of weeks, and it did not disappoint.
Well, if Drew Carey's right, Cleveland rocks, right? So I've been anticipating it too, but more for the popcorn moments than the actual politics. A convention is really supposed to be just a big party of celebration and the rollout for the general election. And what we've seen so far is, to me, it's a little disappointing. Listen, I haven't been there, and I've had good reports from a lot of people who are. But when I see on TV, you know, video boards failing and not really a good lineup of speakers and things like that, it's a little troublesome to think of it. But again, you're dealing with a candidate that isn't really a candidate, isn't really a politico. He's a personality. So I guess we should have thought this through a little bit more as far as production value. NBC Universal probably made Trump look a lot better on The Apprentice than Trump did.
Well, you know, on the cover of all of the papers, we're looking at the Daily News now, Trump and Ted Cruz. When you see what's happening and Cruz's speech, what do you think?
I absolutely love Ted Cruz's speech. I thought it was phenomenal. I did not expect an endorsement the way that you traditionally see an endorsement. If you remember, you know, people don't remember Ronald Reagan when he lost to Gerald Ford in '76. It wasn't really a true endorsement at the convention. It was kind of a similar speech to what Ted Cruz did. And Ted Cruz, he's definitely setting himself up for the next election. Yeah. Definitely setting himself up for 2020. Also setting himself up to be the conservative conscience of the Republican Party going forward. And listen, one thing you know about Ted Cruz is if there is an establishment around to hammer, he'll do it. And that's what he did last night. But it's interesting his comments afterwards at another meeting that I saw on CNN recently saying that
I'm not in the habit of supporting someone who attacks my wife and attacks my father. One of the things
real.
he said.
That's show prep right there, folks.
Yeah. Well, he didn't ask me to endorse, and indeed, 3 days ago, I talked on the phone with him and told him, I'm not going to endorse you. Is what Ted Cruz said at a breakfast this morning.
And that matches up with Donald Trump's Twitter that said that he saw the speech 2 hours in advance.
Yeah. He said no big deal.
So looking at this, though, we have to be reminded that 2020 is right around the corner politically, and Cruz has aligned himself to be that challenger and that voice. But let's also look at the Newt Gingrich moment where I guess they said Mike Pence got the final rose, but Newt Gingrich and Christie were in the running to be number 2. But Newt Gingrich took over like a boss. He was the greatest spin doctor in the room. He took that Cruz moment that turned into boos and jeering and turned it around and said, hey, he said vote your conscience, and the only person who can defend that Constitution is Donald Trump. He spun that right around the way a true Politico would, in a way that I don't think even Donald Trump was ready to do. He sort of stood in the wings with that steel-focused moment back, and it wound up, the end of Cruz's speech wound up with everyone paying attention to Donald Trump coming in and grandstanding. But if he was a real, like, political person, which his badge of honor is he isn't, he would have had a way to position himself and say, I am that guy, instead of having his campaign manager start a chorus of boos.
Gene, do you think that Donald Trump really wants to be president? And are you familiar with the comments that Kasich recently made?
I think Donald Trump wants to be president. I don't think you go through months upon months upon months of scrutiny of you, your personal life, your wife, your children, every word that you're saying under the microscope. You don't go through all that and then not want to take the job. Is it a high-pressure job? Of course it is. We've seen presidents age over the years when they're in office, and we've seen the pressures they've been through. Of course Donald Trump wants to be president. He wouldn't be putting himself out there in this much of a public manner, which he hasn't done ever in his life, if he didn't want the job.
Okay. And the Kasich comments?
John Kasich, to me, is a bit of a disappointment. The convention is in your home state. You're not attending. You're really not assisting the cause of getting that candidate for your party elected. It's a very interesting dynamic because John Kasich would have been the same person 4 years ago, whipping everybody in shape to get behind Mitt Romney, even if they didn't believe him. He would have been the same person for John McCain, doing the exact same thing. Now that the tables are turned and he's kind of in the back seat of the car and someone else is driving, he's acting like the people that he was criticizing probably 4 years ago.
But
Well,
I
for
don't think
anyone
it's
who
someone
didn't-
else who's driving. I think it's the fact that it's Trump who's driving more specifically. Like, do you think that makes a difference? Because in some ways you can say, okay, it's sour grapes just because I didn't get the job and you're in my home state and I want to be the man. But then there's another view of that it's Donald Trump. Like, if it was someone else, he would have shown up for them.
I'm sure Donald Trump likes to think that it's all because of him,
Yeah.
a lot of it. But I'm sure that if a Ted Cruz or another transformative candidate would have been on the main stage, it would have been the same thing. The only reason that people who are called the establishment embraced Ted Cruz is because he was the last great hope to stop Donald Trump.
Yeah.
If this would have been a Ted Cruz convention, he would have been just as vocal about the changes that are being made because they're not coming from the top down. Ted Cruz likes to think of himself as a bottom-up guy, and a lot of grassroots conservatives would get behind that idea. So I think that he would have been the same way, even if it would have been a Ted Cruz.
I mean, there's obvious divisiveness in the Republican Party. Democrats are smiling. Can this lose the election? What do you think of all this?
No, absolutely not. I think that you'll see some divisiveness. Of course you will. Everybody who loses is going to be sore about it. Donald Trump is a new entity in politics. He has tapped into a populist movement that a lot of grassroots conservatives don't see as being true to their principles and their values. But at the end of the day, when you look across the ballot and you see who else is on the ballot, the only place that these conservatives can go is to Donald Trump. They're not going to cross party lines and go to Hillary Clinton. So as much as they're hemming and hawing and being upset about Donald Trump being the man, at the end of the day, they're going to fill in the oval or pop the Chad or pull the lever, whatever they do in every other state.
Okay. Yeah, please.
Yeah, I think some of that divisiveness comes with Trump and some of his racial comments. And so there was an article actually in the New York Times 2 days ago talking about black Republicans feeling uncomfortable with some of the speakers of the convention speaking down, telling African Americans how to feel. When it comes to the Republican Party and black voters, I know there was just a research that came out that zero people of color in Ohio, particularly African Americans, were going to vote Republican. Do Republicans care about the black vote?
Can I jump in for
Sure.
1 second? Because we did here at BRIC, when we partnered with The Guardian, we did something very specific on Republicans of color and this Republican leadership initiative. And fully a third of the people that I know and have talked to in doing this are in Ohio right now, and they are people of color, black and Latin people specifically, and they're there. They're there for the party. They're there for the vision. They might be in a sort of love the sinner but hate the sin sort of mode, but they're showing up for the party, and they're ready to vote and toe the line for them. And I think they want to keep their voice in the thing. Even if they don't like what's coming out of the mouth now, they still want to have the ear.
And I think this has more to do with the messenger than the message. I think the message of the conservative movement should be embraced by people of minority. I think that the Republican Party is doing a very poor job of reaching out. We've tried it in Brooklyn, we've tried it in New York City, and there's been some good results. However, I think those that Brian was just talking about are those who believe in the message already. Getting the message out further to people who are not interested in politics. Look, we're in the middle of summer. How many people other than the true hardcore people are paying attention to politics right now?
It's kind of hard to not pay attention, but at the same time, we're just getting into the real meat of it now. The next couple of months, what do you think will be the issues that will be trending and sort of driving the news cycle as we get closer to the election?
Well, I think you're going to hear the rhetoric actually ratchet up even more so than what we have now. If you can believe that, it's going to ratchet up more. Donald Trump and his camp are going to hit Hillary Clinton on the email scandal continuing on. Now Congress wants to see if she perjured herself. Hillary Clinton got a huge gift from Ted Cruz in saying, vote your conscience. She finally has a message that she can latch onto. If she gets enough people to hate Trump more than they hate Hillary, that's what's going to happen. This is a choice for me, at least, of a bad candidate versus a worse candidate. And there's really there's no hero here to like, to love.
Some would argue that this whole convention is a giant gift to Hillary Clinton because, as you said, it's not very well run. People have been telling me, even on the way from the airport, there's not any real signage or anything to make you feel like, oh, welcome to Cleveland, we're going to win this thing. And they get there and the app isn't working on what to do and there's no sort of master list. So it's like a comedy of errors, and Hillary Clinton is like licking her chops waiting in the wings because they're not going to really get a bump after that nice little bounce you really get after the big convention and the world is watching you, because the Democrats are on their heels 2 minutes after this thing closes. They're going to put all their firepower and great speakers and sort of the anti-Scott Baio, all these Hollywood A-listers that they've lined up for their show. So I can't imagine that this convention has Hillary Clinton anything but chomping at the bit.
Well, also, I just want to add, and you can speak on this, but on day 2 of the convention, we did have a chance to hear from Governor Chris Christie. And, he really whipped everybody into a frenzy with his, because he's a former prosecutor, so he's
trial by voter.
Guilty or not guilty, but not, you know what I mean?
He's
So
a former governor.
You're right. I think the rhetoric is only going to ratchet up.
It's going to ratchet up. And just to go back to what Brian was saying about the convention and the bump you get, the bump comes from the speech of the keynote, Donald Trump. That's going to be whether there's a bump or not. And Donald Trump has proven thus far that anything he says is pretty much gold.
Do you think it's weird that he's shown up every night of the GD conference?
Not at all,
like,
not at
that's
all.
been sort of unprecedented. It's like, where's Waldo with Donald Trump? He's going to pop up somewhere in the evening.
But that's what people are tuning in to see. That's what they want. They want to see Donald Trump everywhere.
Well, what's your outlook on the situation with Melania and the plagiarism?
Well, I can say this. It's very similar, obviously. We all agree on that.
Yes.
However, 50 words in a speech by a first lady who's not on the ballot will be forgotten by August.
You think?
Absolutely. I mean, no one is looking to vote for Donald Trump because his wife is a great speaker. No one's going to be looking to Donald Trump to vote for him because his wife knows policy. She's there to be the first lady. And eventually, this woman who doesn't have a public speaking background, who apparently had a speech written for her by somebody else who threw that in because she admires the First Lady. It wasn't meant to be a dig at anybody. It was meant to be, I agree with the First Lady. To me, this is a non-story.
So are you
a non-story?
Right? Are you saying
or is it just another just sort of misstep?
It's a non-story that's going to be gone with a week. Within a week, you're going to be talking about the next supposed misstep.
But it has to make you question the sort of leadership abilities of someone who's going to be with their finger on the button, the old cliche kind of thing.
Melania Trump's finger is not on the button.
No, but her husband wants to be president, and then the wife can't even make an original speech.
If you think Melania Trump is in the room when any real policy decision-making is going on,
but
there's a bridge down the block I can show you.
But Donald Trump has to be in the room if he is having his other half make a speech that parrots something that is from the wife of the person who he cast as the devil, who he raises an eyebrow but won't commit to saying is involved in jihadist actions, or has something fishy about the way he looks when he talks about these police shootings, like all that walking to the edge that he does and backing off without being committal to say something really treasonous about the president, but his wife can go out there and parrot something that person's wife said. That's a little curious for a person who wants to be the leader of the free world.
Let's be clear. The mistake was made by a staffer. The staffer admitted their mistake.
Yeah.
That staffer will probably never make that mistake again because this is a high-profile mistake.
Yeah.
If you don't think that her speech is going to be much closer checked than this one, of course that's going to happen. Donald Trump has made it clear he is not the politician that is going to go out and make the polished speeches. I would not expect his wife to do the same thing. Honestly,
the bar
this is really
very low. Like, you don't expect, you weren't,
but
no
isn't
one
that the
thought.
most brilliant thing for Donald Trump, that the bar is so low that
But
something
no
like
one
this would
thought
be not a story next
Maya
week?
Angelou was going to come out, but then you just send out someone else who reads a speech that Michelle
That's
Obama.
Michelle
But it wasn't the entire speech. It was 50 words within the speech.
Yeah, but it was Michelle Obama who
wasn't
so
Nancy
many
Reagan.
people love.
But
I
isn't
mean,
this
come
beautiful
on,
that the
like,
Republican
let's be
nominee's
real.
wife admires the First Lady of the Democratic Party?
I don't think that's what happens.
That's a first step to making this a purple country instead of dividing red and blue.
And yet
Let
you're
the first ladies get
saying this is a
together.
horrible thing.
I
Come
didn't
on
say
now.
it was horrible. I just said
Gene.
it makes a person.
Now, for those of you watching right now, that's called spin. What I just did.
a person's ability.
I'm starting to get a little
Come
dizzy
on.
sitting here
A little
at
bit.
the table with you.
A little
but,
bit.
You know, I'm glad that you pointed it out because, you know, at the same time, we're also able to see how this has been spinned. And I think ultimately, you're right, it's sort of a non-issue. What can we expect tonight from Trump's speech?
It's going to be probably the most fired up crowd you'll see. I don't have any sources in the Trump room to see exactly what's going to be said, but I'm sure you're going to hear a speech that's huge and all class, and we're building a wall, and all the hallmarks that you've heard throughout the campaign. Listen, Donald Trump has brought out the most voters in a Republican primary in any cycle. I remember South Carolina, he brought in 150,000 new voters to the primary system there. That speaks volumes for the message that Donald Trump has brought thus far. I expect more of the same, probably a little louder, a lot more crowd shots of, you know, Trump supporters going crazy, and I think he'll get the same people that he's gotten all the time. The angry American who is looking for that populist message of recalling back to a time when America was great again.
Okay. How is he going to attract new voters, though? What part of this convention,
That's the
what
trick.
speech, what speaker, who was designed, who was there to bring in new people?
Nobody at a convention is designed to bring in new voters. A convention is meant to shore up your base. It's meant to get your base fired up to be able to go out and work for you. Him on a debate stage next to Hillary Clinton will be where he wants to attract voters. There is a middle ground of independence that everybody's going to be running for now. Trump has done his job, and he has gotten his base ready to go. Hillary has gotten her base ready to go. It's when they're on the same stage together that people are going to start determining, those independents are going to start determining who's who and what's what.
When you have to hear specifics as well, because when they finally do come here for the first debate at Hofstra, I believe they're going to be, that's when you hear specifics. Don't expect to hear policy outlines tonight. You may hear about a wall or something, but you're not going to hear concrete policy. He's speaking to the choir and really getting his people fired up to do all that door knocking and get the ground game. But when it comes time for the first debate, that's when maybe we'll hear some specifics on what really separates them in the path forward.
And we need to hear these specifics. People have been saying there in Cincinnati, they're not addressing police brutality. Like, when are they going to talk about the real issues that are moving America?
Those aren't their issues, though. That's the thing.
No, but they should be their issues.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
They aren't their issues.
There's no
Look at
such
those
thing.
voters. Those 150,000 who showed up in South Carolina who weren't on the rolls before didn't show up because of what happened in New Orleans. They showed up because of the message of the wall, the Muslim ban. They are not concerned with
And they also
Black
showed up
Lives
because of
Matter.
jobs. And to be honest with you, when we're talking about, you know, these tragic past few weeks that we've been talking about, I don't know any conservative that wouldn't want an investigation into a shooting where any person is seated in a car and is shot by a police officer. I can't think of anyone who would not want an investigation of someone who's on the ground resisting with police and ends up being shot by a police officer. These are things that shouldn't be divided by party. We should want to get to the bottom of it. What I think turns people off about, you know, issues involving Black Lives Matter and these things is the rhetoric of some who may not be in the core, but it's always the fringes that get you in trouble. The people who are out there saying, what do we want, dead cops, when do we want it now? That's not a Black Lives Matter message that I hear from the core, but that is a message that is heard by other people when they're thinking about Black Lives Matter, especially on the conservative side. And when you see police under fire as a result of the ratcheting up of the rhetoric, not necessarily the message, the rhetoric, That's what I get concerned about. I was at a rally in actually.
We do have to.
No problem.
We have to wrap it up, but
wanna
I'll
hear
give you another
more,
15 more
but
seconds
yeah.
just to finish up.
Sure, you got it. Listen, this is going to be a cycle that we haven't seen before. It's going to be a cycle where you're going to see a lot more anger. You're going to see a lot more anger. You're going to see a lot more frustration. And for politicals like me, it's going to be fun as anything. It's going to be great to watch.
Maybe we'll definitely make for some great TV.
And that's what Donald Trump's all about, making good TV. We'll make TV great again.
We can talk
Great
about this
again.
all day, all night. We will see you next time, all right?
Absolutely. Thank you.
All right,
Gene,
fair enough.
thank you.